The sun was setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. It had been a long day on the road for Staff Sergeant Martinez, who'd been driving since dawn from Camp Pendleton. His dark blue pickup truck rolled into the rest stop, the engine ticking as it cooled down in the evening air. The rest area was fairly quiet, with just a few travelers scattered around the picnic tables and parking lot. Martinez stepped out of his truck, his joints stiff from the long drive. He was still in his casual clothes, jeans, and a plain black t-shirt, having changed out of his uniform before leaving the base. The cool evening breeze felt good on his face as he stretched his arms above his head. He'd made this drive dozens of times before, and this rest stop was always his favorite spot to take a break. It was clean, well-lit, and usually peaceful. Today, though, something felt different. Maybe it was his training, or maybe it was just instinct, but something made him pause as he walked toward the vending machines. That's when he noticed them, a teenage girl and an older man sitting at one of the concrete picnic tables near the edge of the rest area. At first glance, they might have looked like any other travelers taking a break from the road. But Martinez had spent years learning to notice things others might miss, and several details caught his trained eye. The girl, probably around 15, sat with an unnaturally straight posture that spoke of tension rather than good manners. She wore an oversized hoodie despite the warm weather, and her sneakers were scuffed and worn. Her dark skin contrasted with the pale complexion of the man who sat unnecessarily close to her, his hand resting heavily on her shoulder in what might have looked like a fatherly gesture to others, but to Martinez seemed more like control. As he pretended to study the vending machine options, Martinez watched through the reflection in the glass. The girl raised her hand to adjust her hair, and that's when he saw it. A gesture that made his military training kick into high gear. Her hand formed a specific shape, 3 fingers folded down, then the thumb tucked across them. It wasn't random. It was too precise, too intentional. Martinez remembered the recent briefing they'd had on base about human trafficking awareness. The gesture had gone viral on social media as a silent distress signal, specifically designed for situations where someone couldn't openly ask for help. The girl repeated the motion, this time while seemingly fidgeting with her ponytail, and Martinez's suspicions grew stronger. The man was talking quietly but intensely to her, his words too low to hear but his body language speaking volumes. Every time the girl shifted even slightly, his grip on her shoulder would tighten, his knuckles whitening. When a family with young kids walked past their table, the man pulled the girl closer, as if protecting her, but his eyes darted nervously around the rest area. Martinez had seen enough combat zones to know when someone was scanning for threats. This man wasn't watching out for his daughter's safety. He was watching for anyone who might be paying too much attention. The girl's eyes stayed downcast, but occasionally darted up to scan the area herself, though her looks carried a different kind of desperation. Making his way to the water fountain near their table, Martinez could finally hear snippets of their conversation. The man's voice was artificially cheerful as he spoke about their father-daughter road trip, but something in his tone rang false. The girl's responses were minimal, her voice barely above a whisper, each word sounding rehearsed. What struck Martinez most was what he didn't see: no easy interaction between father and daughter, no shared smiles, no comfortable silences. Instead, there was tension in every movement, fear in every response, and an undercurrent of threat in every gentle reminder from the man about their need to get back on the road soon. Martinez felt his jaw tighten as he observed all these details, his mind already starting to form a plan. In his 15 years as a Marine, he'd learned that the most dangerous situations often required the most careful responses. He couldn't just rush in, that might put the girl in even more danger. But he also couldn't walk away and hope someone else would notice what he'd seen. As the desert sun continued to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the rest area, Martinez knew he had to act. But first, he needed to be smart about this. He needed to be certain. And most importantly, he needed to ensure that whatever he did wouldn't make things worse for the girl who'd been brave enough to send out that silent call for help. Standing near the water fountain, Martinez couldn't shake the image of that hand signal from his mind. Just 3 months ago, he'd sat in a briefing room with his fellow Marines, watching a presentation about human trafficking awareness. The instructor had shown them various videos from social media, including one that had gone viral on TikTok about a simple distress signal: 3 fingers down, thumb tucked across. It might seem basic, the instructor had said, but this signal has already saved lives. At the time, Martinez had nodded along, never thinking he'd actually encounter it at a random rest stop in Arizona. But here he was, watching a teenage girl use that exact gesture while pretending to fix her hair. She did it again now, her movements so casual that most people would never notice. First, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her hand briefly forming the signal. Then, while adjusting her ponytail, she did it again. Her eyes never lifted to meet anyone's gaze directly, but Martinez could tell she was watching, waiting, hoping someone would recognize her silent plea for help. The man beside her shifted in his seat, his demeanor changing as a state trooper's car pulled into the rest stop for a routine check. His hand, which had been gripping the girl's shoulder, suddenly softened into what appeared to be a gentle pat. His entire body language transformed, like an actor slipping into character. He even managed a warm laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Ready to get back on the road, sweetie?" the man asked, his voice carrying just a bit too far, just a bit too deliberately cheerful. "We want to make it to Grandma's before it gets too late." The girl's response was barely audible, but Martinez caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Yes, Dad." The pause before the word Dad was brief, but it spoke volumes. Martinez watched as the man stood up, using the movement to scan the rest area again. He was good, professional even, in how he maintained awareness of his surroundings. But that's exactly what set off more alarm bells in Martinez's mind. This wasn't the casual awareness of a protective father, this was the calculated surveillance of someone who knew they were doing something wrong. The girl's movements were equally telling. Every time she shifted position, it was with careful precision, like someone walking on eggshells. Her shoulders remained tense, her hands fidgeting with the sleeve of her oversized hoodie. When she thought no one was watching, her face showed flashes of fear that she quickly tried to hide. Martinez remembered another detail from that briefing: how traffickers often gave their victims scripts to follow. He could see it now in how the girl responded to questions. Her answers were short, rehearsed, and always followed by a quick glance at the man, as if checking to make sure she'd said the right thing. The rest stop's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the day continued to fade, creating harsh shadows that made everything feel more ominous. A family with kids walked past their table again, and Martinez noticed how the girl's eyes followed them longingly. The man noticed too, his fingers digging slightly into her shoulder until she lowered her gaze. Moving closer under the pretense of throwing away a water cup, Martinez could see more details that confirmed his suspicions. The girl's hoodie was too big and didn't match the warm weather. Her sneakers were worn down on one side, suggesting she'd done a lot of walking recently. There was a small bruise peeking out from under her sleeve when she reached for her water bottle. The man's appearance, by contrast, was too perfect: fresh clothes, clean-shaven, not a hair out of place. His shoes were expensive and new. The contradiction between their appearances was just another red flag in a sea of them. Martinez watched as the girl made the signal one more time, this time while pretending to brush something off her face. Her eyes briefly met his in the reflection of a nearby car window, and he saw a flash of desperate hope cross her face when she realized he was paying attention. That look cemented everything for Martinez. In his years of service, he'd seen that same look in the eyes of civilians in combat zones, people who needed help but were afraid to ask for it directly. He'd been trained to notice these details, to put together the puzzle pieces that others might miss. The man stood up again, his movements becoming more hurried as the rest area grew darker and less crowded. "Time to go," he said, his tone brooking no argument. The girl began to gather her things, her hands shaking slightly as she reached for her backpack. Martinez knew he had to act soon, but he also knew that rushing in without a plan could make things worse. He'd seen too many situations go bad because someone acted without thinking. As he watched them prepare to leave, his mind raced through possible scenarios, weighing options and potential outcomes. The girl made the signal one final time as she stood up, and this time, Martinez gave her the smallest of nods, just enough to let her know he understood. The look of relief that flashed across her face was brief but profound. She knew now that someone had seen her, that someone recognized her signal for help. Now Martinez just had to figure out how to help her without putting her in more danger. As he pulled out his phone, he kept one eye on the pair, knowing that the next few minutes would be crucial. Everything would depend on his next moves, and he couldn't afford to make a mistake. The girl's reaction was equally revealing. At the mention of Phoenix, her eyes widened slightly. Either they weren't supposed to be here, or she hadn't known where they were. She quickly covered her reaction, but Martinez had seen it. A memory from his training surfaced. Traffickers often keep their victims disoriented, making sure they don't know exactly where they are. It makes escape seem impossible. The instructor's words rang in his ears as he watched the girl sneak another glance at the rest stop's location sign, quickly memorizing it. The man stood up stubbornly, pulling the girl to her feet. "We need to get going," he said, his voice carrying that false cheerfulness that made Martinez's skin crawl. "Long drive ahead of us." But his eyes were darting around more frequently now, and his grip on the girl's arm had tightened enough to make her bite her lip in pain. Martinez knew he had to act soon. The man's increasing anxiety suggested he might bolt at any moment, taking the girl with him. But direct confrontation could be dangerous. If the man was armed, things could go bad quickly. Years of military training had taught Martinez that the worst thing you could do in a volatile situation was rush in without a plan. As he watched them gather their things, Martinez's mind raced through his options. He needed to keep them here somehow, but he also needed backup. The girl caught his eye one more time, and he gave her the smallest of nods, trying to convey that help was coming. The look of desperate hope on her face strengthened his resolve. Failure wasn't an option. Years of military training had taught Martinez that the most dangerous moments often required the calmest responses. As he watched the man growing increasingly agitated, he knew he had to act carefully. One wrong move could put the girl in even more danger. Moving casually toward his truck, Martinez pulled out his phone and dialed 911. He kept his voice low and steady as he pretended to be checking his voicemail. "I'm at the Highway 10 rest stop outside Phoenix," he murmured into the phone. "I'm a Marine, and I've got a situation here that needs immediate attention." The dispatcher's voice was clear and professional. "Can you describe what you're seeing, sir?" Martinez walked around his truck, maintaining a clear view of the picnic table while appearing to be just another traveler stretching his legs. Teenage girl, about 15, showing distress signals. Older man claiming to be her father. She's used the TikTok SOS hand signal multiple times. Something's definitely wrong here. As he spoke, he noticed the man checking his phone again, growing more anxious. Martinez quickly snapped a photo of their vehicle, a gray sedan with out-of-state plates, and read the license number to the dispatcher. His heart rate was steady, just like during missions overseas. Stay calm, stay focused, stay aware. The girl was watching him now, her eyes darting between him and the man beside her. She understood that something was happening, but she was trying hard not to show it. Martinez gave her another subtle nod as he continued his conversation with dispatch, letting her know that help was coming. "Officers are en route," the dispatcher confirmed. "Can you safely keep them there without alerting the suspect?" Martinez thought quickly. The man was already showing signs of wanting to leave, his movements becoming more hurried. "I've got an idea," he told the dispatcher. "Just tell the officers to approach carefully. We don't know if he's armed." Ending the call, Martinez opened his truck's hood, making it look like he was having engine trouble. He positioned himself so that his truck partially blocked the path to the suspect's car. It wasn't obvious, but it would make a quick getaway more difficult. The rest stop's lights had fully taken over from the faded sunset now, casting everything in an artificial glow. A few other travelers moved around the area, unknowingly part of this tense scenario. Martinez noticed how the girl's posture changed whenever someone walked near, a slight straightening, a hopeful glance, followed by disappointment when they passed by. The man was getting more aggressive in his attempts to leave. "Come on, we need to go," he insisted, pulling the girl to her feet. But as they stood, he noticed Martinez's truck partially blocking their path. For a moment, their eyes met, and Martinez saw the flash of calculation in the man's gaze. Playing his role perfectly, Martinez waved at them with a friendly smile. Having some truck trouble, he called out casually, "Don't suppose either of you knows anything about engines?" The man's response was immediate and defensive. "Sorry, we're in a hurry." But he hesitated, probably realizing that rushing away would look suspicious. Martinez could see him struggling with the decision: act normal and risk staying too long, or hurry away and draw attention. The girl used this moment of distraction to make the SOS signal one more time, her hand trembling slightly as she brushed her hair back. Martinez pretended not to notice, instead focusing on his phone as if checking a mechanic's website. In the distance, he could hear the faint sound of sirens, still too far away to alert the suspect. The man heard them too, his head snapping up like a startled animal. His grip on the girl's arm tightened visibly. "Really need to get going," the man said, his voice straining to sound casual. He tried to guide the girl toward their car, but now another vehicle had pulled in, further complicating their exit path. Martinez kept his movements relaxed as he typed a quick update to dispatch. Subject getting nervous. May try to run. Girl within arm's reach. He knew from experience that the next few minutes would be crucial. Everything would depend on timing. The girl was doing her best to slow things down without being obvious about it. She fumbled with her backpack zipper, dropped her water bottle, all while appearing apologetic. "Sorry," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "I'm just tired." The man's facade was cracking. His friendly demeanor slipped for a moment as he snapped, "Just leave it." Then, catching himself, he forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "We can get you another water bottle later, sweetie." Martinez could hear the sirens getting closer now. He kept his attention on his truck's engine, but every sense was tuned to the drama unfolding nearby. The man's breathing had become faster, more irregular. The girl's face showed a mix of hope and fear. Other travelers were starting to notice something was off. A truck driver had paused near his rig, watching the scene with concern. Martinez caught his eye and gave him a slight nod, silently asking him to stay nearby. The more witnesses, the better. The sun had completely set now, and the rest stop's fluorescent lights created pools of harsh brightness and deep shadows. Martinez positioned himself so that the man would have to pass close to him to reach his car. It was a subtle move, one that wouldn't appear threatening but would give him a chance to intervene if necessary. In the distance, red and blue lights began to flash, reflecting off the windows of parked cars. The man saw them too, and Martinez watched as his whole demeanor changed. The mask of friendliness disappeared entirely, replaced by something much darker. Everything was about to change, and Martinez knew the next few moments would determine whether this story had a happy ending or turned into something much worse. He shifted his weight slightly, ready to move if needed, while keeping his outward appearance completely casual. The girl's eyes were fixed on the approaching lights, a mixture of terror and hope fighting for control of her expression. Martinez silently prayed she wouldn't do anything to spook her captor now. They were so close to a rescue, but these last few moments would be the most dangerous of all. The sound of approaching sirens seemed to hang in the evening air, still distant but growing closer. Martinez knew he needed to keep the situation under control for just a few more minutes. Drawing on years of experience in tense situations, he closed his truck's hood with a deliberate slam and turned toward the man and girl with an easy smile. "Hey there," he called out, his voice friendly but firm. "You folks mind giving me a quick hand before you go? Battery's acting up." As he spoke, he pulled his military ID from his wallet, letting it be visible enough for the man to see. It wasn't a threat, just a casual revelation that he was a Marine. The effect was immediate. The man's eyes locked onto the ID, and Martinez could almost see the calculations running behind them. Running from a regular traveler was one thing, running from military personnel was another entirely. "Like I said, we're in a hurry," the man replied, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. His grip on the girl's arm was so tight now that his knuckles had turned white. She winced but remained silent, her eyes darting between Martinez and the road where the police lights were becoming visible. Martinez took a few steps closer, maintaining a relaxed posture while positioning himself between them and their car. "Won't take but a minute," he said, his tone still casual but carrying an undertone of authority that came from years of service. "Looks like you could use a break anyway. Long drive ahead, right?" The man's face twitched at the question. "Yeah, heading to—" He paused, just for a split second, but it was enough to show he was trying to remember which version of his story he'd told earlier. "To my mother's place." "Grandmother's," the girl whispered, so quietly it was barely audible. The man's head snapped toward her, and Martinez saw real fear flash across her face. The rest stop had grown quieter now, with fewer travelers moving around. Those who remained seemed to sense the tension in the air, keeping their distance but watching. The truck driver from earlier had positioned himself near his rig, phone in hand, clearly ready to help if needed. Martinez kept talking, each word carefully chosen to buy time. "You know, it reminds me of trips with my own family. Always important to take breaks, stay safe on the road." He emphasized the word safe, watching as the girl's eyes met his briefly, understanding the message. The man started to pull the girl toward their car, trying to edge around Martinez. "Thanks for the offer, but we really need tow." "I insist," Martinez said, his voice dropping its friendly tone for just a moment. The men froze, and in that instant, both of them knew the pretense was over. The girl must have felt it too, because she stopped moving, her body tensing like a spring ready to uncoil. The distant sirens were much closer now, their wailing unmistakable. The man's face went through a series of emotions: fear, anger, calculation, desperation. His free hand moved toward his jacket pocket, and Martinez prepared himself for the worst. "You don't want to do that," Martinez said quietly, his voice pitched so only the man could hear him. "Think about how this ends. Right now, you've got choices. Don't make them worse." The rest stop's lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the man's face as he weighed his options. Other travelers had cleared the area, sensing the dangerous atmosphere. In the distance, the first police car turned into the rest stop entrance, its lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. The girl was trembling now, tears rolling silently down her face. But there was something else in her expression too. Hope growing stronger with each passing second. She'd stopped trying to hide her fear of the man, her whole body leaning away from him even as he gripped her arm. "Last chance," Martinez said, his voice firm but not threatening. "Let her go and face this like a man." He could see the moment the man's resolve began to crack, his eyes darting between Martinez, the girl, the approaching police cars, and the gathered witnesses. The man's grip on the girl's arm loosened just slightly. It was all she needed. In a burst of desperate courage, she twisted away from him, stumbling toward Martinez. The man reached for her, but Martinez was already moving, stepping between them with the fluid motion of someone who'd trained for moments exactly like this. More police cars were pulling into the rest stop now, their lights flooding the area with pulsing colors. The man backed away, raising his hands slowly as officers began to emerge from their vehicles. The girl had pressed herself against the side of Martinez's truck, as far from the man as she could get while still staying close to her rescuer. Martinez kept his position between them, his body relaxed but ready. He'd been in enough combat situations to know that the most dangerous moment often came right at the end, when everything seemed under control. The man's eyes were still darting around, looking for escape routes, but the police had positioned their cars perfectly, cutting off any chance of flight. The evening air was filled with the sound of car doors opening, radios crackling, and officers calling out commands. Through it all, Martinez stayed focused on the man in front of him, watching for any sign that he might try something desperate at the last moment. The girl was crying now, but these were different tears, tears of relief, of release of the fear and tension of who knows how many days finally breaking free. A female officer approached her carefully, speaking in soft, reassuring tones. As the police moved in to take control of the situation, Martinez finally allowed himself to breathe normally again. The girl caught his eye one last time, and through her tears, she mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." The rest stop had transformed in a matter of minutes. Police cars with flashing lights surrounded the area, their red and blue beams bouncing off the windows of parked vehicles. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, securing the scene while keeping curious onlookers at a safe distance. The man was quickly handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car, his previous confidence completely shattered. As the officers patted him down, they found what Martinez had feared, a concealed weapon. The discovery sent a chill down his spine, knowing how differently this could have ended. The girl sat in the back of an ambulance now, wrapped in a warm blanket despite the mild evening air. A female officer sat beside her, speaking softly and taking notes. The girl's shoulders had finally relaxed, though her hands still trembled as she held a cup of water that one of the paramedics had given her. Martinez gave his statement to a detective, explaining everything he'd observed. "The hand signal was what first caught my attention," he explained. "We just had training about it at Camp Pendleton. 3 fingers down, thumb across, it's been spreading on social media as a way to silently ask for help." The detective nodded, writing quickly. "Good thing you recognized it. Turns out she was reported missing from Nevada 3 days ago. Parents have been desperate to find her." He paused, checking his notes. "Says here she was contacted through social media, convinced to meet up. Guy's been on our radar for similar cases in other states." A police officer approached with the girl's backpack, which they'd retrieved from the man's car. Inside, they found her real ID and phone, both of which the man had taken to control her movements. There was also a small notebook filled with what looked like rules written in shaky handwriting, evidence of how he tried to break her spirit. The girl's story began to emerge as she spoke with the officers. She'd been convinced to meet the man after weeks of online manipulation. He promised her a modeling career, telling her everything a lonely teenager might want to hear. Instead, he'd taken her phone, forced her to memorize false stories, and threatened her family if she tried to get help. "I saw that hand signal on TikTok months ago," she told the officers, her voice stronger now. "I practiced it in secret, just in case. I never thought—" She paused, wiping away tears. "I never thought I'd actually need to use it. But when I saw him watching us—" She looked at Martinez with gratitude in her eyes. "I knew I had to try." Martinez stood nearby as the officers worked, still alert despite the danger being over. He'd seen enough combat situations to know that vigilance was a habit worth keeping. The truck driver who'd stayed nearby came over to shake his hand, saying what many were thinking: "You did good, Moraine. Real good." The local news had caught wind of the situation, and a few reporters had gathered at the edge of the rest stop. The police kept them at a respectful distance, protecting the girl's privacy. This wasn't about headlines. It was about getting her safely home to her family. More details emerged as the police searched the man's car. They found evidence linking him to other missing persons cases, hotel receipts, handwritten notes, multiple phones. What had started as one rescue was quickly turning into a major break in several ongoing investigations. The detective pulled Martinez aside again. "The FBI's been looking for this guy for months," he explained quietly. "He's part of a larger trafficking network. Your intervention here, it's going to help us shut down more than just one criminal." As night fully settled over the rest stop, additional police units arrived. The girl's parents had been contacted and were already on their way from Nevada, driving through the night to reach their daughter. The relief in her voice when she got to speak to them briefly on the phone was palpable. The paramedics had checked her over, finding no serious physical injuries, but recommending she be taken to the hospital for a thorough examination. They were gentle with her, understanding that the emotional wounds would take longer to heal than any physical ones. One of the younger officers approached Martinez with a look of admiration. "What made you so sure?" he asked. "I mean, they could have just been a regular father and daughter having a bad day." Martinez thought about it for a moment. "It was everything together," he explained. "The hand signal first caught my eye, but then it was all the little things. How tense she was, how he controlled her movements, the inconsistencies in their story. In the Marines, we learn to trust our instincts when something feels wrong." The girl was preparing to leave for the hospital now, but she asked to speak to Martinez one last time. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I didn't know if anyone would understand the signal. I was so scared, but then I saw you watching and I just knew. Thank you for not looking away." Martinez felt a lump in his throat as he replied, "You're the brave one here. You kept your head in a terrible situation and found a way to get help. That takes real courage." The female officer who'd been with the girl shared a small detail that made the whole situation even more powerful. She says she almost didn't try the signal, thought it was just a silly social media thing. But her friend had insisted they all learn it, just in case. Goes to show how something as simple as a TikTok trend can end up saving a life. 3 days after the rescue at the Arizona rest stop, the local police station's community room was filled with news cameras and reporters. The story had captured national attention, not just because of the dramatic rescue, but because it highlighted how a simple hand signal, spread through social media, had saved a young life. The girl's parents had asked Martinez to join them for the press conference, though they chose to keep their daughter away from the cameras. Her mother couldn't stop crying as she hugged the Marine who'd helped save her child. "We'd been searching for 3 days," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. 3 days of not knowing if we'd ever see her again. And then we got that call. The police chief stood at the podium, explaining how the rescue had led to even bigger breaks in their ongoing investigations. "Thanks to evidence found in the suspect's vehicle, we've identified connections to multiple missing persons cases across 3 states. The FBI has already made several additional arrests." Martinez sat quietly through most of the press conference, uncomfortable with being called a hero. When asked to speak, he kept his words simple and focused on what really mattered. "I just did what anyone should do, paid attention when someone asked for help. The real hero is that brave young girl who had the courage to signal for help and the wisdom to keep trying until someone noticed." Back at Camp Pendleton, Martinez's commanding officer had nothing but praise for how he'd handled the situation. "This is exactly why we include civilian safety awareness in our training," he told the assembled Marines. "The skills we learn to protect our country can protect our communities too." The story spread quickly across social media platforms. The hand signal, already known to many, became even more widely shared. Schools began including it in their safety awareness programs. Parents started teaching it to their children. What had started as a viral TikTok trend was now being recognized as a vital safety tool. A week after the rescue, Martinez received a letter at the base. Inside was a handmade card, carefully decorated with colorful drawings. The message inside was simple but powerful. "Thank you for being there when I needed help. Because of you, I got to hug my mom and dad again. I'm getting better every day, and I'm going to make sure other kids learn the signal too." The girl's recovery was going well, according to updates the police shared with Martinez. She was working with counselors who specialized in helping trafficking survivors, and her family had surrounded her with love and support. She'd even started speaking to youth groups about her experience, turning her traumatic experience into a way to help others. The FBI's investigation continued to expand. The evidence found in the man's car had led them to a larger trafficking network. Multiple missing persons cases were being solved, and families who had lost hope were finally getting answers. What started as one Marine noticing a hand signal had turned into a domino effect of justice. Community groups across the country began organizing awareness workshops. They invited law enforcement officers to teach people about the warning signs of trafficking and the importance of paying attention to those around them. The hand signal became just one part of a larger conversation about community safety. Martinez found himself being invited to speak at these workshops, though he always kept the focus on awareness rather than his own actions. "It's not about being a hero," he would tell audiences. "It's about being human, about paying attention when something doesn't feel right, and having the courage to act." The truck driver who had stayed nearby during the rescue reached out through social media to share his perspective. His post went viral. "I watched a Marine handle a dangerous situation with such calm and skill. He didn't rush in like an action movie hero. He stayed smart, kept everyone safe, and made sure that girl got home. That's what real courage looks like." Social workers who specialized in helping trafficking survivors noted a significant increase in rescue cases where victims used the hand signal. The simple gesture had given vulnerable people a tool, a way to ask for help without putting themselves in more danger. It was especially powerful because it could be used even when someone was being closely watched. The rest stop where it all happened put up a small sign, "Stay alert, stay aware. Your attention could save a life." It didn't mention the specific incident, but regular travelers knew the story. The picnic table where the girl had first signaled for help became a reminder that ordinary places could become sites of extraordinary courage. 6 months after the rescue, Martinez received another update. The girl had started high school again, surrounded by supportive friends and family. She'd created a small support group for other survivors, and she was helping to develop a safety awareness program for teenagers. Her mother reported that while there were still difficult days, her daughter's strength continued to amaze everyone around her. The story became a powerful reminder that in a world where people often feel helpless against large-scale problems, individual actions matter. One person paying attention, one girl being brave enough to signal for help, one Marine willing to get involved. These simple human choices had created a ripple effect of positive change. Martinez kept the handmade card on his desk at the base. On difficult days, it reminded him that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in far-off places, but right here at home, in quiet moments when someone needs help and another person cares enough to notice.